Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of the Village Radio program by Mona Mohamed. I am very humbled and blessed today. We have another very extraordinary woman with us in the studio. I'm extremely excited and somewhat intimidated by her presence. We have Arwa Abusamra. Arwa means gracefulness and beauty, and she has certainly lived up to both, mashallah. Arwa Abusamra is an eloquent Palestinian author. Born in Saudi Arabia, she's the author of a memoir, Tea with Arwa, which was published by Hachette in 2011 and has sold approximately 40,000 copies and counting, Allahumma barik. Her book tells her story of migration to Australia with her family almost 30 years ago. It ties the element of food and culture of memories with childhood as she introduces traditional and modern dishes to the reader as part of her journey. Through these dishes, she shares memory, tradition, and challenges of cultivating a new sense of belonging in a new place while maintaining a strong connection with her Palestinian heritage through food and storytelling. Arwa is also the author of a short story, Muslim Footprint, published in the anthology Coming of Age, Growing Up Muslim in Australia by Alan and Unwin in 2014. Arwa has also published many articles in newspapers and magazines in Australia, such as SBS Food magazines, about a variety of social issues. Furthermore, she holds a master's degree in interpreting and translation and is a certified Arabic interpreter working for several government agencies. She is also a loving mother of 3 beautiful children, a talented cook, and an extraordinary photographer. Just stalk her on Facebook and you will see how amazing her food photos are. And last but not least, she is also the wife of, drum rolls, or the halal police would say, duff rolls, Hazim al-Masri. Assalamu alaikum, Arwa.
Alaikum assalam rahmatullah.
I'm so excited that you're here today. I've got to pinch myself.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really, really humbled to be invited to speak on your show.
Oh, jazakumullah khair for coming.
Thank you.
So this was just a snippet about you. I could be talking about you for hours. How do you see Arwa? You know, if I was to ask you, who is Arwa, what would you say?
I think maybe that's the first time anyone's ever asked me that, so I'm going to try my best to answer it. I think I see myself first and foremost as a mother, a daughter, a sister, a wife. I see myself in those roles as being probably the most important things that that are a part of my existence. And when I say that with a total humbleness that I'm privileged to be in those roles. So I think maybe a disciplinary, maybe that's another thing my kids would say about me. But I take a lot of pride in defining myself with those particular titles. Yes.
Well, motherhood is the best job in the world. You know, regardless of all those amazing degrees, and being an author is also amazing. And I'm actually surprised you didn't say that as part of Arwa, because I know you write a lot.
You know what? It's funny because it's such a part of my being. Ever since I was a little girl, I was back in Saudi Arabia where I was born. We went to school there, and it was something that I was really, really passionate about in school. And in Arabic it's called ta'bir, which was basically a part of
expression.
That's right. It was actually a subject, a part of Arabic that we did, other than qawaid, which is grammar and so on. And I was actually the best student by my teacher's testimony. So
I'm not surprised.
She would always say to me, I want you to read your short story. And I would take such pride in that. I would work on it, and it would be something that was very expressive and very sort of fulfilling to read, even for a young child. So I think maybe because it's just a part of my DNA, it's something that I don't mention as being
SubhanAllah. You are a writer, but you chose to introduce yourself as a mum.
Yes.
And that says a lot. And
yes.
we might just pause a little bit here and give a message to some of our young girls, the teenagers that are growing up, and some of the mums out there. I meet many.
Yes.
And when you ask them, what do you do?
Mm.
They say, I'm just a mum. Oh, I'm just a mum, I don't work.
Mm.
And that really kills me. It gets
Yes.
under my skin. What do you mean you're just a mum? Being a mum is the most amazing, most rewarding job that you could possibly. You're not paid. You're unpaid.
That's
working
right.
overtime.
That's right.
No sick leave.
That's right. I think, you try and I try and understand where that comes from, and I think because there is, a culture of devaluing what women do at home, but I think once that comes out of the mouth of the actual, woman who's expressing that, it saddens me a little bit. I do a lot of sessions with young girls in schools, and, I try and motivate them and inspire them to actually broaden their horizon of what their choices and options are in life and seek education, I guess, on a higher level, like tertiary education. And I do get a response from the tough ones in the class that say, I don't really need to go to uni or do any more study after school because I'm just going to be a stay-at-home. I'm just going to get married and stay at home and raise kids.
Yeah.
And I bring them straight back to it and I say, you know what? You've actually just put your hand up for the most difficult job in the world. Anybody can go and build a building or build a bridge or, create a fantastic new dish. But the reality of the matter is that you're actually raising the next generation. You've actually put your hand up for one of the most difficult jobs that you could possibly comprehend because you're investing in another human being. So to be a mother is not just to have the easy way out. It's actually the most difficult job I do. I can sit down and write a story for the next week and be able to sort of be content at what I've produced and then change that. But with my children, I'm constantly finding challenges.
Struggles,
That's right, and the struggles that every mother has. And I think that women need to understand and put a value on what they do as being mums that are staying at home raising their children, but to also be able to realise that it's through you that this next generation will be able to be confident, productive, good, decent people who have high morals and are actually active working elements in members of society. So to me, that role is far more difficult than anything I do.
So do you sort of tell the girls, what have you prepared in order to become a mum?
I do. I say to them, well, you are raising the next generation. What will you teach them?
Yeah.
And when they realise that the substance isn't there, then that light bulb moment goes on and they realise that, well, if I'm not going to do well in my school, then how am I going to ensure that kid is going to do well in their school? We need to understand that the value of an educated woman, an educated woman, there's an old Arabic saying that says that an educated man is an educated individual, but an educated woman is an educated society. And that just shows you the emphasis on how much positive impact
or negative,
yeah, that's right, would have an educated woman would like to think of always the positive.
Yes.
But how much of a positive impact she would have on the next generation, which will be the leaders and people who are going to basically look after, society after your role is finished. So,
and what would you tell women that feel quite insignificant? They devalue themselves and they don't think they have, being a mum, just stay at home mum and just raise the kids, and they don't feel they're significant in the first place, let alone leave an impact on the next generation or leave an impact on their husband or their brother or anybody else for that matter. What would you tell them?
I think if we allow the dialogue to continue with saying that, for example, women do very little at home or what you do at home isn't valued, and if we actually believe that and embody that, then we're adding to the problem. So to be able to understand the worth and the value of oneself is something that you need to work on. We all need to do that. We all need to be reminded sometimes of just how much it is that we do, not just as mum, even for men. So to understand the value and the worth of what it is that you're doing. Well, not from an arrogant perspective, but from a perspective of actually understanding that even the little things count. Sometimes the big things don't work without the little things. Yeah. And not to say that the women do the little things, absolutely the opposite, because a cluster of things that we perform, if you were to bring a professional to do every single job of one of those jobs, you wouldn't be able to get one person to perform them. And we do that. Women are far more, in my opinion, far more resilient. They need to realise that there is so much for them to do, even if you are a stay-at-home mum. I was a stay-at-home mum for a good maybe 12 years, I think, or 10 years, about that. And during that time, although I had completed my first degree when I had my first child, I continued the process of learning, but in different areas. I became interested in looking up, for example, the diversity of food, what food represents for so many different cultures and societies around the world, what it tells. So that self-education that came through that, which ended up being some part of the product which was in my book, that came during the time that I was a stay-at-home mum.
Did you choose to be a stay-at-home mum?
I did. I actually made that choice. I actually sat my final university exam 7 months pregnant with my eldest daughter, Lamia. So I was actually doing an English exam and writing essays, which is not, it's not multiple choice. So while I was pregnant, and it was, as uncomfortable as it was, I remember Hazem at the time I was so keen on taking another 6 months off, and he knew, although, he hadn't gone to uni after school, he said to me, if you don't finish it now, you'll never forgive yourself. Yeah. So he was my encouragement to actually just get that last subject done and finish it. And alhamdulillah, I did do that, and it was obviously through support and through help, not just from my partner at the time, but it was also through my family. But that self-motivation, that dedication to actually see something through that needs to happen. And I did use whatever education I did gain in my first degree. I did use that in my home. Educated women tend to think that education is just basically formalized institutional education, and it's not. It's any form of education, anything. You pick up a book and you read it, you're actually adding to your knowledge. طبعا we always ask for Rabb al-Alameen to always give us طبعا العلم النافع. We don't want العلم اللي هو ليس في منفعة للإنسان. There's no benefit or beneficial knowledge, not the non-beneficial knowledge.
Yes, of course.
So being able to further or broaden one's understanding of whatever it is, understanding, for example, how to parent better, child behaviour. I did that all when I was a stay-at-home mum. It wasn't I was doing nothing. I was doing something. I was raising the next generation. And inshallah, I would hope that, I do a good job, just like every mother out there wishes.
We all aspire. Kids don't come with a manual.
Absolutely
and
not.
And each one of them is totally different
unique.
To the other. Yes, it's quite unique, even though I've got identical twins, and they're not identical.
Isn't that lovely?
I can tell you that they are very unique in almost all ways. Subhanallah. And people get mixed up. They actually, I said this before, they have their face recognition to unlock their phone, and they unlock each other's phone.
And look at each other's stuff.
Yes, they do.
Oh, goodness gracious.
And yet they are extremely unique. So it is very challenging, and it is very rewarding, and it is a learning journey, and we learn from each other as mothers, and we learn. There's a difference between education to get a degree through rote learning and just not really digesting what you're learning. You're just doing it for the exam and regurgitating it at the end, and
That's right.
and just walking out with a piece of paper. And there's a difference between wanting to learn.
That's right.
I mean, you could be very مثقف and highly educated from that sense, from a thaqafa, without a degree.
Absolutely. I can give you, for myself, I've always spoken about this, especially with the young girls that I see through schools and the programs that I'm a part of. Not that I'm running only myself, but also programs that invite me out to speak to some of the students.
Yeah, there was a particular program you were talking about.
I do. Look, I will mention it. I'm not sure if she's probably going to,
no, go ahead.
Look, it's absolutely fantastic. It's called Lit Up, and it's it's something that I've actually been invited to do with the girls, and now more recently with the boys as well. But what I do discuss with them when it's my turn to speak to them is to actually give them a window into, you may see somebody who's, but you're already accomplished, and your situation is different to mine, and it's very hard to find a common ground or to be able to relate to it. And all I do is I share with them two stories: my grandmother's story, Allah yarhamha, and my mother's story. I tell them because it shows them that there's an opportunity here where you can you're at school, you're enrolled, you still have a future where you can adjust things now and be able to strive and aim higher. And I share with them the story of my grandmother Hindiya, and she was, back in the days that, you'd get married young. She got married at, the age of 13. And marriage at the time was, basically a method of survival, really, and
Yes.
it wasn't sort of about compatibility and so on. But she still found a wonderful man in my grandfather.
Alhamdulillah.
She had 13 children, and
Allahumma barik.
of those 13 children, 10 of them survived. And she was out of school. She basically, as a 13-year-old, she was at home, working as a seamstress. She was a very talented one. And she was raising her children. But she had this hunger in her. She thought about their future, that she wanted them to have a better future, more options and so on. So she decided to become, somebody who is well-read. And my grandfather saw that in her. And what he did was such a gentleman thing to do. He actually provided her with a library that was wall-to-wall,
MashaAllah.
ceiling to floor, full of books, politics, literature, religion, anything, you name it. And that library actually was there the last time I visited her back in Syria. And those books would have been read over and over again. And she was one of the most educated people you could speak to. You would actually think that she had like a half a dozen degrees under her belt when you spoke with her. She knew about the internet when I was still learning about it as a uni student.
Wow.
And it was something that I admired in her so much. And she
From
would
that
speak.
generation
Absolutely.
to be wow.
Absolutely.
But the support of your grandfather cannot be left
Absolutely.
because a lot of men in that generation wouldn't support their
That's right.
wives for an education, or this is
That's
not
right.
what you're meant to be doing.
That's right. The support was kind of a balance, because her and my grandfather had a workshop where they actually used to mass produce uniforms for schools and so on.
Okay.
So she was the lead seamstress there, and she taught so many girls. So
MashaAllah.
the support went both ways.
Yes.
So it was what he needed, she gave him.
They complemented
and
each other.
Absolutely, which is how a relationship really survives all these things that we see in life.
Yes,
We're here for a short time. It's a journey. Make the most of it and the best of it.
Yes.
May Allah be pleased with all of us in our choices.
Allahumma ameen.
Ameen, ya
Allahumma
Rab.
ameen.
So she did that, and she was somebody that put all of her children through school. And when she was no longer able to, my mother carried those reins. She applied for a teaching job and went to Saudi Arabia and worked in basically a village, a desert village where there was no electricity and no proper roads. And she worked there to put her brothers through university in England.
Allahumma
To
barik.
me, that
I'm
type
getting
of
goosebumps, really.
to me, that dedication, that strength, that leadership, it's beautiful to see. And it was supporting, to educate the men in the family, although we think of the men always supporting the women, but it was vice
the other
versa
way.
for me. That's right.
Was your mother the eldest?
She was not.
Oh.
She was one of the eldest. I think that maybe she had three siblings before her. I think I'll have to think about
Okay.
that.
MashaAllah.
Yeah.
MashaAllah. Your grandmother didn't just teach her children about education. It seems to me also she's done a really good job at teaching them how to the bond between the brother sisterhood or siblings bond and
Yes.
family.
Absolutely.
So can you shed a bit of light on that?
She was very fair when it came to. It wasn't just the sons that she put through school. My mother was also is an educated woman. She's a qualified teacher, and back then, it was a big thing for a woman to sort of choose a career path before sort of marriage and home.
Yes.
And my mum did do that, but at the same time, it wasn't at the cost of her being wanting she wanted to have a family and
Yes.
find a partner in life. So it wasn't at the cost of that. It was something that she.
It wasn't a compromise.
That's right.
Yeah.
She balanced the two, which was she was able to, alhamdulillah. She did teach them to have sort of solid bonds between the siblings. No family is perfect, but I think that what we do need to teach our children, which I believe my grandmother taught her kids, was that to be able to plan that you are a member of a unit. And understand that whatever decisions and things that you make in your life do affect you, but they also affect that unit.
Yes.
And that's what keeps a family solidarity and strength, alive. So I hope to teach that to my children. That doesn't mean they don't fight and bicker.
We have lots of Tom and Jerry's in families.
Oh, goodness gracious me. Look, I'm not complaining, alhamdulillah, but I got to tell you, they keep me alive, the grey hair's there, but they keep me alive.
Never a dull moment.
Never.
Allah barik lak fihum ya Rab.
Allah yaslamik.
Well, I can see where you get your resilience. I can see where you get your leadership.
Absolutely.
Allahumma barik. It's it runs in the family, genetic.
Alhamdulillah.
What can we say?
Alhamdulillah, I would hope so. My
And you've
sister's
put
also
your
very
touch-
strong women. Strong women, but the type of strong woman that you can say, "Ukhti amlet hik," or my
Yes.
sister's achieved this, or my,
Yeah,
you know, like
yeah.
it's admirable. You know, I
Yes.
love it.
Well, there's a movement now on Facebook in Arabic, and they
Yeah.
write hashtag strong and independent.
Oh, Allah.
You know, so when you say it now, like, I don't say strong and independent, so you know it's in English, but when you say strong and independent, you know it's been written in Arabic with a hashtag.
Can I try that? Strong and independent.
مظبوط.
Oh my goodness! If I was to interpret like that, I'd be fired.
So apparently there's this movement of women being very strong and independent,
Yes.
but in such a negative way.
Yeah.
To be single, to be a single mom, or to be a feminist in the negative sense.
Us, of course, yes.
So let's shed a little bit of light on how can you be strong, independent, but also have a companion. And I realise in our culture, a lot of men, most men, like us to nimshif dhillahum, you know, be in their, not in their shadow, but yani, in the sense to
Don't get too big.
Yeah, no, not also even not get too big, but
Okay.
in the sense of you know when to take the back seat and you know when to lead.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And intelligent women know when to keep that balance because there are times where we get sick and we have to go to hospital, or we might be visiting our parents and we have to be attending to them, and husbands take over for a couple of days, and then when you come back, you're, where have you been? I've just appreciated everything you've done. So
Yes.
there are times where they can't handle what we do for a couple of days, and there are times where they want to be handling all the situations and being the man of the house, and الرجال قوامون على النساء, and keeping a balance between when to take the back seat and when to shine and take the lead. And be,
So the completion to that is bima faddal Allah. So if let's just say I'm better at something than my husband. This is not a real example, but it's an example of hypothetical example. So if I'm better at something than my husband is, what would be the logical thing to do? It would be logical for me to be able to do that.
Yes.
That's the logical in a rather than looking at it just in a relationship sense. In society, who usually is the person that you would like to be doing the job? For example, a doctor. Would you go to a baker for a medical condition? You won't.
Not, yeah.
You would go to somebody who is a professional and the best at what they do so that they could solve that problem for you. And in the dynamics of the family, each of them is good at something better than the other person. Nobody's good at everything. That's impossible. Yes, there is a role of leader, but I think that you can lead from, if you like to call it the back seat, as you just called it, and not from behind. You can. There is always a diplomacy that needs to be used when you're interacting with people. Why not apply that in your home? That's the best place to start. You know, to actually be able to be heard and to have a place where your opinion matters. I think it starts with understanding your own value and self-worth. We can't expect somebody to know our value and self-worth if we don't see that. And I'm not a counselor and I'm not a psychologist, but this is lived experience. This is experience that I've had, whether it's in my life or the lives of people around me that are close to me. So understanding, you know, there's another thing in Arabic that I absolutely love and I repeat a lot. رحم الله امرئ عرف قدر نفسه. And what does that mean? And who are we saying that to? We're saying that to anybody and everybody. When you know the value of yourself, لما الإنسان بيعرف قيمة نفسه, and قيمة نفسه is not attached to arrogance. It cannot be, because it cancels it out.
Yeah.
So understanding your worth and your value and what you bring to the table is important for the other person on the receiving end to see that too. And that just doesn't go for women, that goes for men too. There's a lot of stories of men who work their butt off, really, that are not appreciated.
No.
And they work themselves to the ground to provide for this family, and they're unappreciated, and that's also not acceptable. So once that balance happens, where number one, deen has to be a part of every conversation that we're having, understanding that just like you want to feel valued, you have to value other people's contribution also. So that's very important, to be present in a relationship. You know, I'm not a relationship counselor, but I can honestly tell you,
gold.
Keep yourself in check all the time. Like the way I keep that balance in my life, you have the privilege of, you know, self-reflection.
Yes.
And if you don't have that, you have that maybe through the networks of support that you have around you, whether it's family, whether it's female companionship. Having one good friend is better than having 100, 50-50 friends, if you like.
Yes.
So having that is vital. I think it's important for our survival as women. The strong female relationships that we build in our life actually help us through exactly what it is we're talking about here. If you grapple with something, you may be able to sort of bounce it off a friend, get advice from people who you trust and understand the dynamics of who you are,
yes.
know you well enough to give you good advice.
And you have to accept it.
Of course. And I think that self-reflection, when you sit down and you say, okay, well, I feel like things are a bit out of control. Like, for example, how do I manage my time at home? A lot of people say to me, how do you get around to... And you know what?
That was the next question.
I know you were going to ask that question. I think you have to keep yourself in check. I really think that you have to... I keep a list. The way I stay sane is that I keep a list of things that I have to do and the things that I would like to do.
So is this daily, weekly, monthly?
This is weekly, and on a weekly basis, there are the daily lists,
chores,
but they're usually the chores and things that have to be done on that day. It's not usually a very long one, but the weekly list that I would have would include things that I would like to accomplish by the end of the week. And at the moment, I'm working on my website for Tea with Arwa and another my interpreting.
Oh, so you're starting a blog?
I am.
Yeah,
I am, but I'm not sure how that's going to go. So at this stage, I'm doing that. So I cannot sit there for a week and work all on that. It just doesn't work that way because there's other things at this end of time.
More important.
I'm a daughter, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, all of those things. So I keep a list and I would like to have, and I tick things off.
So it's like a timetable where you spend an allocated time on
back to basics.
So this is mummy time.
That's right.
This is your time.
That's right.
But you can't choose it at a time where the kids are going to be getting on your nerves, and so you choose a time.
That's right.
That's something that I also.
Well, this is my off time being here with you today.
Oh, I'm so privileged.
I said Saturday morning. I'm out. Sorry, guys.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much for coming. It's
a pleasure.
I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and I'm sure all our audience will be. We will be too as well. So, choosing the right time for the right thing is also extremely important. And I know some women who choose, for instance, to write something, and then all the kids are around, they get angry. I can't concentrate. Leave me alone. But I'm trying to write this. So it's not really the kid's fault because it's more of her fault. Yes. Why would you choose to write a story or to write an important email at a time where your kids are all around jumping? So choosing time for you where the kids at an appropriate time is also important. It's not just about time for you. It's about time for you at the appropriate time. Does that make sense? It's a time.
Absolutely does. Absolutely. Look, time management is absolutely of utter importance in this. It's absolutely important. When I choose to have me time where I'm writing something, I make sure that it slots into when the kids need me time as well. So when they actually need some alone time to do something, whether it's my youngest playing with her slime, or my son on his iPad for his 1 hour technology time, or my oldest daughter watching her favourite show. So nobody else wants to watch that show, so she watches it alone. So when they're doing alone time stuff, I'm doing my alone time stuff. I've actually made them realise that then after that hour's done, we get back together and we sit on the couch and we have a cup of tea, whatever it is. So when I'm time managing for myself, I try and have that be a part of what they do after school or what they do on the weekend. So, for example, there's another thing that we do where on Sunday mornings, for example, or Saturday mornings, depending on what we've got planned on the weekend, we have an hour of reading. So we sit down and they pick up a book and they'll read it, or they'll read some passages from the Quran. They'll read something. So that needs to be something that they constantly do. This is a routine I've developed for my kids because I've taught them to be, big readers from when they were young. So this is something that I do, and we all sit in the same space and we're quiet and we're reading. And
alone me together time.
Alone me alone time. Yeah. You know what? I'm so lucky that I can actually choose to have a day off during the working week. Yes, it means less pay, but at least I have my sanity at the end of the week. Yeah. So when I do have that time alone and I'm home by myself, I manage most of those things because I know when the kids are around, they're not entitled to have all of my time because I'm more than one thing. I'm mother, we already mentioned that, daughter, wife, whatever. But at the same time, it teaches them to value their alone time. You don't want to be raising children with the wrong perception of mum needs alone time, that means I'm in her way. No, you need alone time too. Sit in your room, enjoy your space, play with your toys, do whatever it is that you, basketball, whatever it is that you love to do in that alone time. So it's about balancing, teaching them how to balance that. You know?
You know, you translate.
What, say that again? Oh yes.
So
look, if you're used, they're the worst things to interpret those things. It's basically what you raise your child to do. Yes. They will grow with age doing the same thing. So they will age doing that.
So we shouldn't wait until they're teenagers in order to instill those things into. I know a lot of women who say, my kids are my life.
Yes.
You know, our kids are part of our life.
Absolutely.
They are a big part of our life. Our spouses are a big part of our life, but they're not our life.
That's right.
And this is also something that a lot of women in our culture find difficult to grasp. It's changing. It's changing slowly.
Yes.
But
I think because the definition of what the role is. So, for example, when you define yourself only with one role, and then that role sort of tends to diminish over the child will grow, become more independent.
And then you're lost.
Then you're lost.
I'm alone. What do I do? What do I do with myself?
Right. Your identity is confused. Yes. You don't know where you're supposed to be. And here we have issues. For example, we do see that, where the mother either becomes too over-involved in her children's lives or becomes not a part of their life at all. And that both of those extremes are unhealthy. So understanding that keeping yourself engaged, being active, being a part of something is for your own benefit. That gives you that extra special sort of something that you do just for you, and that's really, really important.
Well, what are you going to remembered by? You think of yourself as an identity.
That's right.
Of Mona, who's Mona, who's Arwa, who's that person as a person.
Yes.
What makes you happy? Yes. It could be having your kids around you. It could be, your family being healthy, and it could be many things. But
Absolutely.
What makes you happy as a person? What do you do to make you happy? You might cook, you might paint, you might garden, you might go hiking, do whatever you want.
Absolutely.
What makes you happy by yourself when you're alone?
Yes.
What makes you happy?
Absolutely. And you should do things that make you happy. You're entitled to that. I think that, believe it or not, after, having spent all that time with my children, being by choice a stay-at-home mum at the time, and I told you I was in that process of learning about so many other different things that I really didn't have time to learn about when I was a teenager, and, couldn't sit there and watch my favourite sort of program about cheese. I know every episode of this program called Cheese Slices, and it actually teaches you so much about what goes into the process and the people who make it and the history and the geography of that land that it comes from. Absolutely beautiful. So I had time to
cheese
do
lady
that.
Now.
I am. People are going to be so surprised, but I am. I absolutely love the variety of cheeses and just their versatility. You could change one ingredient in the way you make cheese and it will produce a completely different range. So it's really, really great. And I love blue cheese.
But have you tasted mish?
No, I haven't. I've heard about it. Look, I know what it is, but I've never tasted it.
Well, this is a combination of cheeses.
Oh, wow.
That's fermented for...
I know that it's fermented, but I've never been in contact with it.
Oh, well, I know what to get you next time. Don't hate me for it.
I won't. But I think that to go back onto the topic where we were talking about sort of engaging in something and being actively involved in something, I did have an identity crisis even after I wrote my book. I felt like it was something that I needed to redefine who I was for me, not because anybody was asking me of who I was. I needed to redefine that. And, you look for advice in people around you that love you and care about you. People that give you solid advice are the ones that have a direct contact with the results of that advice. Don't take the advice of somebody who doesn't have direct contact with the results of that advice, because it's not as personal. It's not as in touch with the actual situation. I remember, sort of being in limbo for a little while when I was a single mum, and I was waiting for the university semester to start, and in that time I was sort of going through a time of wanting to sort of be engaged in something, so eager to be engaged in something different. All my kids were in school, and I actually got advice from my sister. She said to me, look, I've just taken up scripture classes in my local school. She used to live in the Shire, which was very sort of a smaller number of students that were in those schools that were needing Islamic scripture. And she said to me, why don't you do that? It'll give you, a point of contact. It'll sort of revive you in sort of knowing what you want to achieve when you're in that degree and all that. It'll sort of give you that jolt. And it was the best thing I ever did. I actually signed up for 3 schools, I think, at the time. And I was doing
3.
Yeah, and I actually dedicated an entire day of my week to do those 3 schools. So it felt like a full-time job. So it got me back into that routine again of going in the morning and coming back and planning my day when I knew I was busy. So it pushed me back into that routine of, I'm not going to be at home all the time. I can't come back to the house when I want to. So how am I going to manage? Yeah. So it was a great start, and it was the most rewarding thing I had done in a long time, because the contact with those students, I could see the benefits. I was teaching them about their faith. I was sharing with them something that I would usually share with my own children, and I was passing it on. Mashallah. And that was beautiful.
Yeah, volunteering is healing.
Yes. Absolutely.
And wherever you choose to volunteer, whether you're volunteering on a radio show now or volunteering to teach kids their religion, and to you at the time, some of these kids, particularly in the Shire area, this could be the only, is it half an hour or 40 minutes?
I think generally it's about, you could block it off at 40 minutes because some class periods tend to be a bit longer or whatever, but yeah, roughly about that.
So these 40 minutes could be the only time they have talking about knowing their religion, to talk about their religion. Some of these kids don't practice Islam anywhere else. So what message would you like to pass across to our listeners who have some time and don't know what to do with themselves?
Yeah.
What would you suggest, and who would be the point of contact?
Well, I'll tell you what, this call out probably doesn't go just for the women. This is also for the men. Our youth are in great need of to be in contact with male role models. We really do.
It's very true, but a lot of the men work full time.
Absolutely.
And it's very hard to be
available
during that, and that's why I'm reaching out to the women. But if you're able to mix your schedule and sort of work on the weekend to be available for scripture, then
The way I see it is that if you are a woman who has the time during your week where you can don't dedicate the whole week, dedicate 1 hour maximum, if you can't manage anything else, 2 hours of your week to teaching a child something that you would have taught your children about their faith. Think of that as being your source of abundance, sadaqah jariyah, for the afterlife. And what that will do is that will engage you in your community. You will see the levels of variation of the children, the knowledge that they have about their faith, and that will actually motivate you to be even more engaged. There's nothing more beautiful than teaching somebody something that they could take and present to Rabb al-Alamin Yawm al-Qiyamah. Something that they could pray for you when you don't even know they're praying for you. No, fulana allamatni, so and so taught me this. So that's a great way of starting. Absolutely.
People tend to forget that the knowledge that we have is a ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask us what we did with our knowledge.
Absolutely.
Like the same way Allah is going to ask us about what we did with our time, what we did with our money.
Absolutely.
So if you have knowledge and you haven't passed it on, Allah يسألنا عنها يوم القيامة. He will ask us about this knowledge. What have you done with it? Have you kept it to yourself?
Yes.
Or have you shared it with others? It could be a knowledge about anything.
That's right.
It could be anything that's actually beneficial to the community. It doesn't have to be a degree that you've earned.
Absolutely.
It could be anything that you are learning.
Absolutely.
Now, back to scripture.
Yes. The point of contact for that would be the official authorised body to be in schools is ISRI, and their headquarters, I'm sure they're still in Bankstown. If I'm mistaken, look them up. That's your first point of contact. Don't be intimidated, because they actually do training sessions for the teachers that are about to start new.
You're always a step ahead of me. That was my next question.
Maybe. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Should pace myself.
Go ahead.
And what they do is they train the teachers that are coming on, and don't be intimidated by the material. You'll know it. You'll know it because it's actually laid out in such a simple and engaging way, and they give you the material in advance so that you'll be able to read through it it's not rocket science. It's something that you actually practice every day. Don't let that
basics.
intimidate.
It's a
Very
basic.
even if it's basics and it's reminding you of something that you forgot, double benefit.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
So, or it's ISRA, ISRE, isn't
That's
it?
right.
Yes.
That's correct.
So, Jazakumullah khair for that, and hopefully this will recruit many, because
so.
there's a dire need at the moment for scripture teachers.
Absolutely.
Would I come to the next question that I wanted to ask you, and it's about Hazm.
Okay. Oh.
Being a public figure and all, and knowing how much you like your private space and how you like to set boundaries. Now, how did you work with that when you first got married, and through the different stages of your life in your marriage, and where you are now? Tell us a little bit. I'm sure a lot of people are now going closer to the radio and putting it up, or putting their earphones in to listen to the app.
I think that I never saw or will ever see Hazm as the football star, and that's not the first thing that hits me when I even met him for the first time. Hazm is one of those people that is genuinely a wonderful human being, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
And he was somebody of faith, and that is the first thing that I saw in him. His job was actually something that would have not worked in his favour with my family at the time. So, not being athletic, athletic people, or even knowing anything about public sphere and all of that. So it wasn't something that it was going to win him any brownie points with my dad, Allah yarhamu. So when I think that world it's so easy for you to be engulfed in it if you don't have your feet on the ground. And I did say this to Hazm when we first were married. I said to him, I don't want your public life to penetrate into my life at all. They need to be separate. That's your job. That's your life. You need to keep that separate from me and the kitchen when we have children. Yeah. And he said, he was happy. He agreed with that. And
who are you kidding?
I was, totally naive and totally
hopeful, wishful thinking.
Yes, absolutely. Look, if there was an opportunity, there's something always happening every week, requesting involvement, whether it's in mainstream media or even community stuff. It doesn't matter. The requests are always there. Now, navigating that world without a guide is very hard, because Hazm is the first in his line of work to achieve such high achievements, international records that are still standing today. Alhamdulillah. That to me is something that I look up and admire, because I think that he worked really hard to get there, and he actually
broke the stigma.
He did. Yeah. He broke the stigma in a world that was really unfamiliar with Muslims and Arabs from a positive perspective at all. Yeah. So they saw them with a negative eye, or that particular the rugby league world had no contact with anybody like Hazm.
Yeah, and he became a role model to so many boys.
That's right. Through his actions, he never preached, but through his actions, he actually educated an entire society about what it means to be Muslim, what it means to be a male Muslim, especially,
and athletic, and not give in to social other
pressures and things like that. Absolutely, especially that it surrounds. We all know the drama that surrounds rugby league and all of that. We're very familiar with it. Not to be able to sort of be swept up by that. That was hard work. That was
that's a struggle in itself.
It is. I think the ultimate struggle, because you're fighting something that is constant and it's relentless, and to be able to maintain consciousness of Rabbil Alameen through doing that job and asking him to guide you, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was the one who opened this door for him, and eventually opened it for me. If you don't do something positive with it, then you've wasted that opportunity, and you have to be very careful when people look up to you. When people use you as an example, you have to be careful because you have to stay in check constantly. And it's exhausting. It really is. And people think that, I want to be famous, or it might be like a really nice thing to start with, and then you realise the impact that it has, and then you need to start managing.
Not just on you, and your family and everybody else that are involved as well.
Absolutely. So that was really, it was really hard. We learned together. I have, an enormous amount of respect for anybody who puts their hand up to being in front of a camera and does receive, whether it's critique or, people sort of online bullying, whatever you want to call it. I don't like to define that particular privilege with those things, because if you can do something positive and you leave a positive mark in the attention that is upon you because of what you do, then you've achieved a good thing, we hope, inshallah.
MashaAllah. It's just very, very wise words, MashaAllah. This takes me back, and I've got to shed some light on when you went back to uni, when you were a single mum.
Yes.
What made you go back to uni on your own during that difficult time? We know it was very challenging for you, and you were trying to stay out of the spotlight, and it was difficult. What made you go and study something that was, you're passionate about? But why is it that during that time you chose to start studying?
I think any relationship breakdown is difficult. I don't think anybody can discount that there's, no matter how amicable the disconnect is.
No,
absolutely.
No.
We did have a sort of a very similar experience to most people have a breakdown in a relationship and a marriage, and it devastates anybody.
Of course.
Regardless of what the reasons are, it's devastating. But at the same time, within that devastation, to maintain a level of dignity and respect to the union that you once had is vital. If not for each other, for the children that are involved.
Yeah.
And I cannot put emphasis on that enough, because at the end of the day, the recovery that you may have from a broken down relationship as an adult, you may be able to survive that because you're an adult. You may have a longer journey, but you'll come out on the other side. But the children that are in the middle of that are being shaped by that. And that is something that you cannot undo. So to maintain that level of dignity for yourself and for the person that you're dealing with, and to always be conscious of Rabb al-Alameen. Always to have, we say something بالدين بقول إنه يتقي الله. لما الإنسان بيتقي الله, you're conscious of Rabb al-Alameen in whatever that you do, even in times of hardship, anger, hurt, whatever you want to call it, you know that he's going to be watching over you. You know that he's not going to let you come out on the other side disadvantaged. And I have to say, for me, that was the thing that probably, kept me going, and I achieved, I guess, a level of contact that was, positive for my children at the end. So it's vital that I sort of mentioned that at the time, the father's involvement in the contact with the kids, even at a time of separation, and when people have gone their separate ways, which is perfectly fine. There is you can't sort of force something, and if it comes back together or it doesn't matter. That balance needs to be had, because the children are the most important thing in that union. And I have to say, at the time, Hazem was extremely attentive to his duties, whether it was, alhamdulillah, whether it was financial, whether it was, the time with the kids, the picking up and the dropping off. He never waned on his responsibility, not once. And I have to give him credit for that, because that meant that the difficult process of that separation and that divorce was a little bit easier.
Yes. A lot of mums, stop the fathers from seeing the children, deprive them of any kind of interaction between them just because of that reason. What would be your message to those mums? Some of these mums might have a legitimate reason, or they might be in too much pain to be able to interact or see that person again, which they were their husband, but they are still the father of their children.
Yes.
What's your advice to these mums?
I think the advice is, like you mentioned, that unless there's a risk for that child and there are danger issues, you should basically follow the safety for that kid, and what that child will be affected by. You should be the one that protects them from that, if that is the case. But when that's not the case, and it's just hurt and basically being vindictive towards the other party. And this is not just to the women, this is to the men too. We see a lot of men that if they stop, for example, providing the financial support for the mother, and that's really, really hard. They need to understand that in that position, it defines who you are, because that money ultimately is for your children. Now, we cannot speak in specific terms, we have to speak in general terms. If every person who's going to go through something like that, whether it's the mother, or the wife, or the father, the husband, you need to always understand that anything that you do, understand how it impacts that child. Don't look at how it impacts the adult. The adult will recover. Recovery will come with time, whether you get back together again or not. The reality of the matter is that what you do defines who you are to your children. And that should be at the forefront of whatever choice you make. Even if it kills you to give your ex-wife money for her children because she's going and she's getting her nails done, whatever it is that their reasons, and I've heard all these things being mentioned before, it really ultimately at the end of the day is about who you are.
Yes.
We don't go out, our good actions or our good deeds are not limited to who's receiving them. You say, be a good and kind person no matter who's on the receiving end. And if that's at the forefront of how you navigate that difficult time, then that should be your only guide. And again, التقوى أن تتقي الله في عملك is the most important thing in whatever you do. الواحد إذا بتقي الله أنا لازم أتقي الله مثلا in when I buy groceries from my home, not to overspend and be overindulgent. You have to apply that everywhere. So why wouldn't you apply it in the most difficult of times?
And وكلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته.
Absolutely.
We not living in the same house with your spouse doesn't mean that you stop caring. You're not a rai. You are still a rai.
Are you really going to diminish, your values because you're faced with a challenge? Yeah. Where would society be if that's how we navigate problems?
Yes.
You would have moral decay. So you should not compromise who you are just because you're faced with a really terrible, hurtful situation.
Yes.
You should be able to apply the best of who you are in those situations. That's when they're needed to shine.
Jazakallah khair. It was very. I'd like to thank you very much. As I understood and felt your emotion, your raw emotion about this particular situation, and I'm sure our listeners can feel your authenticity with your feelings.
Thank you.
Jazakallah khair for that. Back to studying. You went to studying during that time.
That's right. Well, that was the question. I now remember. Oh my goodness, that's a sign of a great conversation. You don't know where it started. Yes, I did. I actually, again, I had like a little identity crisis. I think I was trying to sort of figure out who I was outside the role of mum and author and so on. And even with all of that going on, we have to understand that we evolve. I actually got some advice from my sister. I love my sisters so much. She actually gave me advice. She said to me, why don't you look, you've got your first degree is English and Arabic literature.
She the same one that told you to go scripture?
She did. I owe her. I'm indebted to you, Liam. And she said to me, why don't you do, translation or interpreting? Because I think her father-in-law was involved in that business, in that line of work. And I said to her, but, I don't know. And I was, sort of confused about where I would start. And all it took was a phone call. I rang the accrediting body and found out what I needed to do. I applied straight to NAATI, and surprise, surprise, I failed. I actually applied straight. Yes, I applied straight to NAATI, and I did sort of study at home, and I did my vocabularies at home and all of that. And then when I did the test and it came back as a fail, it actually motivated me even more to say, well, okay, my language skills are great, but that means there's something there in this profession that I don't know. I better go learn it. So I looked up where I could get, study degrees or diplomas in that field, and it was before the second last day of the closing date for applying for that master's degree. I applied. I got my reply within a week.
MashaAllah.
My sister-in-law I was still learning to navigate the new uni system of applying online. So my sister-in-law, Allah Jibla al-Khair, she actually did that with me because she had just finished, from uni herself. So there you go with that family support again. Don't be too shy to ask because then you'll get the help that you need, and then you can offer it when they need it. So I applied, got my response in a week, and I said, I'm off to uni. And I learned.
How did it feel?
It felt amazing. I actually that speech that speech I did for the Gaza Children's Fund is actually that's my hometown. That's my place. So standing in front of that in front of the lectern with all the sort of the seats in front of me, I was on the other side of that. It was such a homecoming for me. I loved it. But going back to uni was the best thing I ever did because I always wanted to, didn't know what, and when I did, I felt right. But that was for me.
Yes.
And when I did my master's degree, I can honestly tell you I did not get one high distinction in my first degree. My arts degree, I did not get one. This time, it was the benchmark. So, alhamdulillah, I was able to achieve that with consistency and dedication and, help, really. There's a lot of help that came from my mum and my older sister. And, I'm forever grateful. Yes.
Always have an A-team around you.
Surround yourself with people that actually
have your best interest at heart.
Absolutely, and actually make you feel valued. Not because it's a pretend situation. You actually are valued in what you bring to that, dynamic.
Yes.
And that's very important. That's very, very important.
It is. Thank you for sharing that. And I tell women all the time, anytime I get a chance, follow your passion. It doesn't matter where you are in your life. We're very blessed to be in Australia, where there are so many different pathways to get to where you want. And mature age students start at 21, so don't feel like I was saying 20, mature, you're calling me, I'm 50. Doesn't matter if age is just a number.
Yes, it is.
It's how you feel on the inside.
Well, you know what? I did much better the second time round. I actually had a more well-rounded approach to my work, and that's why there was the...
Got a lot of experience up your sleeve as well.
Well, I did tell Hazem recently, I said to him, listen, I think I might be going back to uni again and doing a PhD. I could have sworn he would have fainted if I didn't hold him up. Another one? I said, well,
But in interpreting as well, or
it definitely will be in my line of work now with interpreting and translation. I do feel that it's in me. When I don't know, but it's in me.
I mentioned on the previous episode that I met a lady in her 90s,
mashallah,
who was part of the UN.
Wow.
And she studied, she left the UN because she wasn't happy with the bureaucracy. And she's from Egyptian origin, and she moved to the States. And then she studied linguistics and started her own center in the States, teaching children how the Arabic language, but in a very particular manner, learning through role play.
Very nice.
Ibn Malik. Apparently she divided into 29 sections, and each section was taught through poetry initially, and and the next stage for the older kids was taught through music, el-kamang, the violin, and playing different musical instruments, in addition to teaching Arab through role play.
Oh, nice.
And then after doing that for quite a while, and she compiled a program, like a massive program, that now she's selling for big dollars, mashallah. But it took her over 20 years to compile the program. And after doing that, she decided to move back to Egypt. And she is in her 90s, as I said, and now she's in her 4th year studying law.
MashaAllah.
Because she felt there is a need for it in the community, because when they're translating particular things that are related to law in the United Nations, a lot of things get lost because they don't know where we come from in Sharia. They're talking about things they have no idea about. And she said, we need a translator who knows the law of the country, and I'm going to be one.
Yes. That's
now, how's
wonderful.
that?
What's that for motivation? Oh, my God.
So mature age. For those who think they're too mature to go out and study, hoping that this will give them a sense of motivation.
Yes.
And we've got Arwa, who's one of us, a mum, a wife, a wonderful author, and someone who's just very down to earth, and I'm so blessed to have her with me today. Initially I felt quite nervous that I'm competing with people that were highly skilled behind the mic, and whereas I'm just someone who's an ordinary person who's trying to make an extraordinary difference into our community.
Yes.
So,
and you're doing a wonderful job. Look, you cannot replace passion and dedication, and you're a natural. Oh my goodness! I think I heard, your presence on the radio with one of the previous interviews that you've had, and I thought, she's a natural. You've had training in a past life.
Oh, thank you very much. I've had training over doing the dishes and while driving, and the kids tell me, who are you speaking to, Mum? Like, these are my invisible audience kids. It paid off.
Wonderful.
So, Jazakallah khair for coming. Thank you so much. I'm sure everybody else are going to be asking me for a copy of this, so I better put a shout out for anyone who is good with audio editing. If you've got some skills and would like to help us out with that, that would be awesome. Please send us an email to the Village Radio Program at gmail.com or on Community Support Services website on Facebook. You have been listening to the Voice of Islam, Mona Mohamed with Arwa Abusamra. Have a wonderful evening. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.